So I want you to start by visualizing a really specific, highly relatable scenario.
Okay.
You're holding your phone, and you use your thumb or, maybe Face ID, and you tap to open your banking app.
Oh, boy.
Right. And there's that brief little moment while the loading icon spins. Now, I want you to think, what is your immediate emotional reaction in that exact second?
Yeah.
Like, is it calm? Is it curious? Or is it a sinking feeling in your stomach, like a quiet little, oh no?
For a vast majority of people, I would bet heavily on that, oh, no. And what's truly fascinating is how universal that feeling actually is.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to matter what your background is or, even what your income level is. That anxiety is just pervasive.
It really is. And that shared anxiety is actually the exact reason we're doing this deep dive today. We've got a really interesting piece of source material to explore.
We do?
It's a transcript from a channel called Learn in Success. And on the surface, it's actually designed for non-native speakers to learn English. But hiding inside this language lesson is an absolute masterclass in behavioral personal finance. So our mission today is to unpack these psychological insights and help you bridge the gap between intellectually knowing about money and actually feeling confident when that app loads.
It's like a brilliant Trojan horse of a text.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if we connect this to the bigger picture of behavioral economics, the core theme here isn't about getting rich overnight.
No.
It has absolutely nothing to do with having like a fancy finance degree or mastering complex Wall Street investment strategies.
Oh, right, which is a relief.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The source makes a very clear, grounded argument. True financial peace of mind is simply the byproduct of small, frictionless systems that you set up once and repeat daily.
So let's unpack the disconnect here, because there's a massive gulf between the theory of money and the actual daily reality of our spending.
Oh, absolutely.
And the source shares this incredibly striking anecdote about a guy named Jahid. So payday arrives, his salary hits his account, he opens his app, and he has this moment of absolute shock.
Just panic.
Yeah. The number is already incredibly low.
Yeah.
He describes this visceral feeling that, and I'm quoting here, someone else spent your money.
Which perfectly captures the dissociation so many of us experience.
Right.
I mean, we look at the ledger and feel complete alienation from our own decisions. It's a cognitive dissonance where our brain essentially refuses to accept that we were the ones who made all those small incremental taps and swipes.
But I wanna push back on human nature here for a second.
Sure.
Because why does that happen? We're talking about smart people here.
Yeah.
You can be highly educated. You can manage complex logistics at your job. You can be a generally responsible adult. Yet you're totally baffled the second you look at your own bank balance.
It's so true.
Jahid even noted that he could explain financial concepts perfectly in theory, but still felt completely out of control in practice. Like, why does our intelligence suddenly vanish when it's our own money?
Well, it comes down to the difference between intellectual knowledge and behavioral control.
Yep.
In our modern economy, money has become entirely abstract. It's invisible.
Right. It's just numbers.
Exactly. It's a pixelated number on a screen. And when money is just an abstract concept and spending is as frictionless as, say, double-clicking a side button on your phone.
Apple Pay, yeah.
Right. You don't feel the physical loss of handing over a $20 bill. The confusion happens because we treat money as a theoretical exercise rather than a tangible reality.
Wow.
Your brain just doesn't register the pain of the purchase. So at the end of the month, you become a passive observer of your own life, wondering where the resources went, which is exactly what the text means by living paycheck to paycheck.
You're just watching the numbers drop like a spectator sport.
Yeah.
So if we're dealing with this dissociation, if we feel like someone else spent our money, the only logical countermeasure is to audit that reality.
Exactly.
We have to force the invisible to become visible and figure out if where the money went actually aligns with who we claim to be.
And that requires confronting our own behavioral patterns.
Mm-hmm.
The source text brings up this concept of materialistic behavior, contrasting the accumulation of physical things with the prioritization of actual experiences or security or personal values.
Because most of us will readily claim that family or health or personal freedom are our top priority.
Of course.
But the action step the source recommends is brutal in its simplicity. It's habit number 1. You write down 3 to 5 things that truly matter to you, and then literally put them side by side with your bank statement from the last 30 days.
Which is almost always a deeply uncomfortable moment of truth.
Oh, I bet. I was actually thinking about an analogy for this earlier, and it hit me. It's exactly like checking the screen time report on your phone.
Oh, man, yes.
You know that feeling. You go through your week genuinely believing you highly value reading literature or, spending quality time with your kids.
Right.
Then Sunday morning rolls around, that little notification pops up, and it tells you that you spent 14 hours last week scrolling through short-form videos.
It's devastating.
It is. And your bank statement is the exact same thing. It's this unvarnished, purely mathematical story of what you actually prioritize.
Because the math doesn't lie,
Yeah.
even when our self-perception does.
Yeah.
And that uncomfortable realization is exactly why people avoid looking in the first place.
Yeah.
Behavioral economists call it the ostrich effect.
Yeah, burying your head in the sand.
Exactly. It's not that people don't care about their finances. It's that the cognitive load and the unregulated anxiety of looking at the mess are just too high.
Right.
So the question becomes, how do we operationalize this awareness without triggering a panic attack?
And the source has a great solution for this, which is habit number 2. You put it in a container. You schedule a very specific 30-minute monthly check-in.
Yeah.
You don't just randomly check your app while you're standing in line for coffee, panic, and then close it for another month.
Putting a time constraint on it is vital.
Why is that?
Well, by limiting it to 30 minutes, you prevent yourself from spiraling into a 4-hour anxiety session with a complex spreadsheet. You're turning an emotional trigger into a simple, bounded administrative task.
That makes a lot of sense.
And during that 30 minutes, the text suggests anchoring yourself with just 3 specific questions.
Mm-hmm.
Where did my money actually go? Did it serve my actual goals? And what is one single focus for next month?
I love how contained that is. It really lowers the barrier to entry. But let's say we have our awareness down. We know our values. We're doing our 30-minute check-ins.
Okay.
Here is where the psychology gets really interesting, because awareness on its own is notoriously weak. Human memory and human willpower are fundamentally flawed.
Oh, totally.
Like by 8 p.m. on a Tuesday, my willpower is entirely depleted. If we rely purely on discipline to make good financial choices every single day, we're going to fail.
Which is why the transition from awareness to automation is so critical. This is habit 3. You have to build systems that protect you from your own decision fatigue. The source is adamant about this. Do not depend on your memory to pay bills or to transfer money into savings.
Because life gets in the way. You get busy, the kids get sick, you're exhausted from work.
Precisely. Every time you have to actively decide to transfer money into a savings account, you're creating friction.
Yeah.
You're giving your brain an opportunity to say, well, maybe I'll just keep it in checking this month, just in case.
Guilty is charged.
Right. But by automating your payments and your savings, routing the exact moment your paycheck hits, you remove the human element entirely.
You let the system do the boring work.
Exactly. You bypass the brain's present bias, which always prefers immediate comfort over future security.
So you're essentially outsmarting yourself.
Yes.
But what about the unpredictable moments? What about when you get a bonus at work or a tax refund or just a little extra cash you weren't expecting?
Habit 4 covers this beautifully.
Yeah, there's a fantastic idiom highlighted in the text here. It's when extra money feels like it's burning a hole in your pocket.
It's such an evocative phrase, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it perfectly describes the physiological reality of the situation. Yeah, when we get unexpected money, we get a dopamine spike. The brain registers it as a windfall, and there's a strong compulsive urge to spend it immediately to complete that dopamine loop.
And isn't that urge entirely natural? I mean, if you've been working hard and you suddenly get a bonus, the psychological reflex is to reward yourself.
Right.
You want to go out for a nice dinner or buy that thing you've been eyeing. So how do we intercept that urge for discretionary spending without feeling like we're constantly punishing ourselves?
What's really smart about the source material here is that it doesn't advocate for extreme asceticism.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't tell you to suppress the urge entirely, save every single penny, and be miserable. Instead, it introduces a filtering mechanism.
A filter.
Yeah. When that money is burning a hole in your pocket, you just insert a pause and ask one question. What small part of this can I save for my future?
Ah, so you're negotiating a compromise with your own brain.
Yes, exactly. You interrupt the compulsive behavior with a moment of conscious intention. You still get to reward yourself, you still get the dopamine hit of the discretionary spending, but you carve out a percentage for your future safety first.
That's powerful.
However, the effectiveness of this entire system hinges on immediate execution, which is habit number 5.
Right. The formula the source gives is learning plus action equals real growth.
Exactly. If you listen to this deep dive, nod along and think, I should set up an automatic transfer, but you don't actually do it today, the knowledge is useless.
It's just financial entertainment.
That's a great way to put it. Neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to form new habits, requires action to close the loop. You have to pair the new information with a same-day action, no matter how small, to actually signal to your brain that a change is occurring.
It's the difference between watching a video on how to do a push-up and actually getting on the floor and doing one.
Spot on.
Okay, so we've audited our reality, we've set up our automated systems, and we're filtering our impulses. Having all of that running in the background frees up a massive amount of cognitive bandwidth.
It really does.
And we're going to need that mental energy because we still have to tackle what I consider the most difficult hurdle in personal finance, the profound social and emotional stigma surrounding it.
We're stepping right into the psychology of wealth now.
Yeah.
Habit 6 directly confronts the intense shame and secrecy that so many people associate with money.
It's arguably the biggest taboo we have left.
Oh, without a doubt.
Like, people will talk about their most intimate medical details or their relationship drama with their friends long before they will ever admit how much debt they have or what their salary is.
And that secrecy is incredibly destructive. Shame thrives in the dark. The text strongly encourages stepping out of that isolation by talking openly with trusted people.
Stop hiding.
Yes. It's about getting on the same page, whether that's with a partner, a family member, or a mentor. When you hide your financial reality, you just compound the anxiety.
Right.
But when you share it, you immediately normalize the struggle and open yourself up to objective solutions.
Which brings us to the actual execution of those solutions and the incredible emotional weight of one tiny 2-letter word: no.
Oh, yes.
Usually when we look at something we want to buy and tell ourselves we can't have it, saying no feels like a punishment. It triggers loss aversion. We feel deprived.
Because you're feeling the acute pain of immediate restriction. Your brain interprets no as a loss of agency and a loss of resources.
But the source offers this perspective shift in Habit 7 that I found incredibly powerful. It simply states, no now equals yes later.
That is a profound cognitive reframe. It completely rewires how we perceive frugality.
How so?
Well, in our culture, being frugal usually carries this heavy negative connotation of being cheap or restricted or just lacking in joy.
Yeah, nobody wants to be called frugal.
Right. But if now equals yes later, then being intentional with your money isn't a restriction at all. It's a transfer of power.
You're buying future freedom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You aren't denying yourself. You are protecting your future choices. You're saying, I value my future peace of mind more than this temporary dopamine hit.
Wow.
It transforms saving from an act of self-denial into an act of profound self-care.
I love that framing. Frugality isn't a punishment, it's a fortress you're building for yourself.
Exactly.
But as important as building that fortress is, we have to acknowledge the limits of frugality. And this leads us perfectly into Habit 8, the final major insight from the source, which serves as a vital counterbalance.
Right.
You can optimize your savings, you can cut out the noise, but you cannot shrink your way to wealth.
It's the ultimate ceiling on frugality. There's a mathematical limit to how much you can save, but there's no limit to what you can earn. The text explicitly warns against the trap of trying to keep up with the Joneses. Meaning, copying the expensive, visible lifestyles of the people around you by accumulating physical, materialistic things.
Because physical things degrade. The moment you buy the car, it loses value, the clothes go out of style, the tech becomes obsolete.
Precisely.
The ultimate habit, according to the source, is taking that discretionary income and investing it into skills.
Which is the only true appreciating asset in personal finance.
Really?
Yeah, think about it. When you buy a physical object, the value immediately begins to decay. But when you buy a skill, whether that's learning to code, improving your public speaking, mastering a new language, or taking a negotiation course, that value compounds.
That makes total sense.
Skills stay with you. They inherently create better opportunities, and they increase your market value over time.
So when we zoom out and look at this entire journey, from confronting that sinking feeling in your stomach to actively buying skills instead of things, it can feel like a mountain to climb.
It really can.
I mean, we're talking about rewiring decades of behavioral habits.
It can feel overwhelming if you view it as a pass or fail test. But the source text actually concludes with a wonderfully grounding, empathetic sentiment.
I really like this part.
Yeah, it reminds the reader, and I quote, "Be kind to yourself. You are not late. You are just starting a better chapter."
That is exactly what people need to hear. So often, financial advice relies on making you feel guilty for the mistakes you made in your 20s.
And guilt is a terrible long-term motivator.
Right.
The goal here isn't to flawlessly execute a perfect financial system starting tomorrow morning. The goal is simply to pick one microscopic step today.
Yeah.
Maybe you just write down your 3 core values. Maybe you just set up a 30-minute calendar invite for next Sunday. Or maybe you just open the banking app and look at the number without judging yourself.
Just looking at it is a win.
Exactly. It's about initiating the process of changing how safe you feel, one tiny degree at a time.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to really chew on, building directly on that idea of investing in skills.
Okay.
Think about the root of financial anxiety. Where does that tight feeling in your chest actually come from?
Fear.
Right, it almost always stems from a fear of loss. The fear of losing the job, losing the savings to inflation, losing your social status.
It's the existential dread of the unknown taking away our security.
Exactly. But if the root of the anxiety is the fragility of our physical and financial assets, isn't investing in your own mind the only truly unlosable investment?
That's a great point.
The economy could crash, the stock market could plummet, the currency could inflate, and physical possessions can be lost or broken.
Yeah.
But no market condition can ever strip away your ability to write, to analyze, to lead, or to create.
It's the ultimate hedge against uncertainty.
So what is one skill you could start learning today, even just for 15 minutes, that would make your future self feel completely secure, regardless of what happens in the outside world?
I love that.
Think about that the next time you're holding your phone. The next time you tap that banking app icon and watch the little loading circle spin. Because with the right automated systems and a compounding set of skills, you get to decide whether that moment brings a sinking, "oh no," or a quiet, unshakable calm,